Good day, friends. So, in this part of audiobook of Gita Rahasya, we will start listening to chapter number 2, which is named as the desire to know the right action, or karma jidnyasa in the local language. The critical position in which Arjun had found himself in the commencement of the Bhagavad Gita as a result of being caught between two mutually contradictory paths of duty and become doubtful about his proper duty is not something unique. The cases of persons who, taking up asceticism or sannyasa, give up the world and live in the woods, or of self-centered weaklings who meekly submit to all kinds of injustice in the world without a murmur are different. But those great and responsible persons who have to live in society and to do their duties consistently with righteousness and morality often find themselves in such circumstances. Whereas Arjun got confused and was filled with this desire to know his proper duty in the commencement of the war. Yudhishthira was in the same position when he was later on faced with the duty of performing the Shraddha ceremonies of the various relatives who had been killed in the war. And the Shanti Parva has come to be written in order to pacify the doubts by which he was then puzzled. Nay, great writers have written charming poems or excellent dramas based on such puzzling situations of duty and non-duty, which they have either found in history or imagined. For instance, take the drama Hamlet of the well-known English dramatist Shakespeare. The uncle of the Prince of Denmark, named Hamlet, had murdered his ruling brother, that is, the father of Hamlet, and married his widow and seized the throne. This drama had portrayed in an excellent manner the state of mind of the young and tender-hearted Hamlet, who, on this occasion, was faced with the puzzle as to whether he should put to death his sinful uncle and discharge his filial obligations towards his father or pardon him because he was his own uncle, his stepfather, as also the ruling king, and how he later on became insane because he did not find any proper path shower and guardian like Sri Krishna, and how ultimately the poor fellow met his end while vacillating between to be and not to be. Shakespeare has described another similar occasion in a drama of his called Coriolanus. Coriolanus was a brave Roman potentate who had been driven out of Rome by the citizens of Rome, and on that account had gone and joined hands with the enemies of Rome, whom he promised never to forsake. After some time, The camp of the hostile army under his command came to be placed outside the gates of Rome itself, he having attacked and defeated the Romans and conquered territory after territory. Then the women of Rome put forward the wife and the mother of Coriolanus and advised him as to his duty to his motherland and made him break the promise given by him to the enemies of Rome. There are numerous other similar examples of persons being puzzled as to duty or non-duty in the ancient or the modern history of the world. But it is not necessary for us to go so far. We may say that our epic Mahabharata is a mine of such critical occasions. In the beginning of the book, while describing the Bharat, Vyasa himself has qualified it by the adjectives that mean filled with the discrimination between subtle positions and aneka samayanvitam, that is, relate with numerous critical occasions. And he has further praised it by saying that not only does it contain the philosophy of ethics or Dharma Shastra, the philosophy of wealth, Artha Shastra in the local language, and the philosophy of release, Moksha Shastra, but that in this matter, what is to be found here is to be found everywhere, and what cannot be found here can be found nowhere else. It may even be said that the Bharata has been expanded into the Mahabharata for the sole purpose of explaining to ordinary persons in the simple forms of stories how our great ancient personages have behaved in numerous difficult circumstances of life, for otherwise it would not be necessary to write 18 parvas for describing merely the Bharata war or the history known as Jaya. 18 parvas means 18 chapters. Some persons may say, keep aside the case of Sri Krishna and Arjun. Why is it necessary for you or us to enter into such deep questions? Haven't that Manu and the other writers of the Smritis laid down in their own books clear rules as to how persons should behave in worldly life? If one follows the ordinary commandments prescribed for everybody in all religions, such as do not commit murder, do not hurt others, act according to moral principles, speak the truth, respect your elders and your preceptors, do not commit theft or adultery, etc. Where is the necessity of entering into these puzzling questions? But I will, in reply, ask them, so long as every human being in this world has not started living according to these rules, should virtuous people, by their virtuous conduct, allow themselves to be caught in the nets spread by rascals, or should they give measure for measure by way of retaliation and protect themselves? Besides, even if these ordinary commandments are considered as unchanging and authoritative, yet responsible persons are very often faced with such situations that two or more of these commandments become applicable simultaneously. And then the man is puzzled as to whether he should follow this commandment or that commandment and loses his reason. The situation into which Arjun had found himself was such a situation, and the Mahabharata contains in several places critical descriptions of similar circumstances having engulfed other illustrious persons besides Arjun. For instance, let us take the precept of harmlessness or ahimsa in the local language, which is one of the 5 eternal moral principles enjoined by Manu as binding on all the 4 castes, namely harmlessness, truth, not stealing, purity of the body, the mind, and of speech, and control of the organs. Ahimsa paramo dharma. Ahimsa paramo dharma, that is, harmlessness is the highest religion, is a principle which has been accepted as preeminent not only in our Vedic religion but in all other religions. The religious commandments given in the Buddhistic and Christian sacred books have given the first place to the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," as has been done by Manu. Himsa does not mean only destroying life, but also includes harming the minds or the bodies of others. Therefore, ahimsa means not harming in any way any living being. Patricide, matricide, homicide, etc. are the most terrible forms of himsa, and this religion of harmlessness is looked upon as the highest religion according to all people in the world. But assuming for the sake of argument that some villain has come with a weapon in his hands to kill you, or to commit rape on your wife or daughter, or to set fire to your house, or to steal all your wealth, or to deprive you of your immovable property, and there is nobody there who can protect you, then should you close your eyes and treat with unconcern such a villain, saying ahimsa paramo dharma, or should you, as much possible, punish him if he does not listen to reason? So Manu says, which means such as Atatai, that is villain, should be killed without the slightest compunction and without considering whether he is a preceptor or guru, or an old man or child, or a learned Brahmin. For the Shastras say, on such an occasion, the killer does not incur the sin of killing, but the villain is killed by his own unrighteousness. Not only Manu, but also modern criminal law has accepted the right of self-defense with some limitations. On these occasions, self-protection is considered to be of higher importance than harmlessness. The killing of tender infants is considered to be the most objectionable of murders, but if the child is being born by transverse presentation, is it not necessary to cut the child and deliver the mother? The slaughter of animals for the purposes of ritualistic sacrifice or yajna is considered blameless even by the Vedas, yet that at least can be avoided by making an animal of flour for purposes of sacrifice. Yet that at least can be avoided by making an animal of flour for purposes of sacrifice. But how are you going to stop the killing of the numerous microorganisms with which the air, water, fruit, etc., and all other places are filled? Arjun in the Mahabharata says, there are in this world so many microorganisms invisible to the naked eye, of which the existence can, however, be imagined, that merely by the moving of one's eyelids, their limbs will be destroyed. Then, where is the sense of repeating orally, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill? It is on the basis of this discrimination that hunting has been justified in the Anushasan Parva. In the Vana Parva, there is a story that a Brahmin, being urged by anger to destroy a virtuous woman and being unsuccessful, surrendered himself to that woman. Then that woman sent him to a hunter in order to learn from him the true import of one's duties. This hunter earned his living by selling flesh, and he was extremely devoted to his parents. Seeing the way in which the hunter was earning his living, this Brahmin was filled with intense surprise and sorrow. Then the hunter explained to him the true principle of harmlessness and opened his eyes. Does not everybody eat everybody else in this world? Jivo jivasya jivanam. That is, life is the life of life, is an eternal truth. And it is stated not only in the Smritis, but also in the Upanishads, that in the times of distress, all this is the food for life. If everyone becomes harmless, how is worship to continue? If everyone becomes harmless, how is warriorship to continue? And when once warriorship has come to an end, subject people will have no protectors, and anybody will be in a position to destroy anybody else. In short, the ordinary rules of morality are not always sufficient, and even the most principal maxim of ethics, namely that of harmlessness, does not escape the necessity of discrimination between the duty and the non-duty. The Shastras have recommended the qualities of forgiveness, peace, and kindness consistently with harmlessness. But how will it be possible to practice peace on all occasions? Prahlada in the Mahabharata first points out to his grandson Bali that people will not stop at openly running away with even the wife and children of an always peaceful man, and he advises Bali as follows. It means forgiveness in all cases, or warlikeness in all cases, is not proper thing. Therefore, O my son, the wise have mentioned exceptions to the law of forgiveness. Prahlada has then described some of the occasions which would be proper occasions for forgiveness, but Prahlada does not explain the principle by which these occasions are to be recognized. And if someone takes advantage of the prescribed exceptions without knowing the occasions when they apply, he will be guilty of misbehavior. Therefore, it is extremely important to understand the principle by which these occasions are to be recognized. There is another law which has become wholly authoritative and acceptable to everybody in the world, whether old or young, and male or female, in all countries and among all the religions, and that is the law of truth. Who can sufficiently praise the worth of truth? The Vedas extol the worth of truth by saying that it is Satya or truth which controls the firmament, the earth, the air, and the other primordial elements. See the incantations, that is, law and truth, have been brought into existence after the performance of effulgent penis. The earth has become dignified on account of truth. The root meaning of the word Satya or truth is which exists, that is, which never ceases to exist, or which is not touched by the past, present, or the future. And therefore, the value of Satya or truth has been properly described by saying there is no religion like truth. Truth is Parabrahma. There is no religion higher than truth is found in many places in the Mahabharata, which also says, and that means when the respective merits of 1,000 Ashwamedha Yajna and of truths were weighed in the scale, it was found that truth weighed more. That means truth weighed more than 1,000 Ashwamedh Yajnas. This refers to the ordinary rule of truth. Manu, in addition, says about speaking truth that all the activities of mankind are carried on by speech. There is no other means like speech for the communication of thoughts than that man who sullies this fountainhead of speech, which is the basic foundation of all these activities. That is to say, the man who is false to his own speech must be said to be despoiling everything at one stroke. Therefore, says Manu, speak only that which has been purified by truth. In the Upanishads, also, the law of truth has been given a higher place than all other laws in the following words. Speak the truth, do what is right. And Bhishma was lying on the bed of arrows after having in the Shanti Parva and the Anushasan Parva taught to Yudhishthira all the various laws, has therefore, yielding up his breath, preached to everyone the law of truth as being the sum and substance of all laws in the following words: you should strive for truth, inasmuch as truth is the highest power. We find that the very same laws have been adopted into the Buddhistic and Christian religions. Can anyone dream that there can be exceptions to this eternally lasting law of truth, which is thus established on all hands? But life in this world, which is full of villains, is difficult. Suppose you have seen some persons escaping from the hands of murderers and hiding in a thick forest, and the murderers who follow them with naked swords in their hands stand before you and ask you where those people are. What answer will you give? Will you speak the truth, or will you save the lives of unoffending and innocent people? I ask this question because preventing the murder of innocent people is, according to the Shastras, a religion as highly important as truth itself. Manu says that do not speak to anyone unless he questions you. And if someone asks you a question unjustly, then do not give a reply even if you are questioned. And even if you know the answer, simply say, like an ignorant person, and save the situation. Very well. But is it not saying merely, very well, but is not saying merely, in effect, speaking the untruth? It is stated in many places in the Bharata itself that do not somehow satisfy yourselves by being false to morality. Morality is not deceived. It is you who are deceived. But if you cannot save the situation even by saying, what is to be done? What will you do if a thief is sitting on your chest with a dagger in his hand and asking you where the money is, and you are sure to lose your life if you do not give a proper reply? The blessed Lord Sri Krishna, who understood the inner meaning of all laws, says to Arjuna in the Karna Parva, after giving him the illustration of highway robbers mentioned above, and later on in the later on in the Shanti Parva, Bhishma also says to Yudhishthira, if you cannot escape without speaking, then do not speak under any circumstances. But if it is necessary to speak, or if by not speaking you may rouse suspicion in the mind of another, then telling a lie has been found after mature deliberation to be much better than speaking the truth, because the law of truth is not confined to speech, and that conduct which leads to the benefit of all cannot be looked upon as objectionable merely on the ground that the vocal expression is untruthful, that by which everybody will be harmed is neither truth nor harmlessness. Narada says to Shuka in the Shanti Parva on the authority of Sanat Kumara, that is, speaking the truth is the proper thing, but rather than truth, speak that which will lead to the welfare of all, because that in which the highest welfare of all consists is, in my opinion, the real truth. Seeing the words, one will certainly think of the modern Western utilitarians and these words may be looked upon as an interpolation. I therefore say that these words have appeared more than twice in the Vanaparva of the Bharata, in the conversation between the Brahmin and the hunter. And in one of these places, there is a verbal change as and also in another place, there is another verbal difference. There is no other reason for the fact that the truthful Yudhishthir confused Drona by the ambiguous answer, Narova Kunjarova. That is, either the man named Ashwatthama or the elephant. And the same rule applies to other similar things. Our religion does not ask us to save the life of a murderer by telling a lie, because, as the Shastras themselves have prescribed, the punishment of death for a murderer, such a person is certainly punishable or fit for death. All the Shastras say that one who bears false witness on such or similar occasions goes to hell personally and also sends to the same place 7 or more of his ancestors. But what are you going to do when, as in the illustration of the highway robbers given above from the Karna Parva, speaking the truth will lead to innocent persons being unnecessarily killed? The English writer Green has in his book named Prolegomena to Ethics said that books on moral philosophy are silent on this question. It is true that Manu and Yajnavalkya look upon such situations as exceptions to the law of truth, but as even according to them, untruthfulness is the less praiseworthy conduct. They have prescribed a penance for it in the following words, which means Brahmins should expiate that sin by offering the Saraswata oblation. Those learned Western philosophers who have not been surprised by the exceptions to the law of harmlessness have attempted to blame our lawgivers on account of the exceptions to the law of truth. I will therefore explain here what authoritative Christian preachers and Western writers on ethics have said on this subject. The following words of St. Paul who was a disciple of Christ, namely, for if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? So these are to be found in the New Testament of the Bible. And Milman, who has written a history of the Christian religion, says that ancient Christian preachers very often followed the same principle. Moralists will not, in the present times, as a rule, consider it justifiable to delude people or to cheat them or convert them. Nevertheless, even they do not say that the law of truth is without exception. Take, for instance, the book on ethics written by scholar Sidgwick, which is being taught in our colleges. Sidgwick decides questions of morality where there are doubts as to what is doable and what not doable, by the rule of the greatest happiness of the greatest number. And by that test of principle, he has ultimately laid down that we do not think that truth ought always to be told to children or madmen or invalids or by advocates, and we are not sure that we are bound to tell it to enemies or robbers or even to persons who ask questions which they know they have no right to ask, if a mere refusal to answer would practically reveal an important secret. So, you can refer to Sidgwick's Methods of Ethics, Book 3 and Chapter 11 for the same. Mill has included this exception to the law of truth in his Book of Ethics. Besides these exceptions, Sidgwick also says in his book that again, though we esteem candor and scrupulous sincerity in most persons, we scarcely look for them in a diplomatist who has to conceal secrets, or in a tradesman describing his goods, or or for purchasers can find out the defects of what they buy. In a third place, he says that similar exceptions are made in favor of Christian missionaries and soldiers. Leslie Stephen, another Western writer who discusses ethics from the material point of view, gives other similar illustrations and says ultimately that it seems to me that the known consequences of an action must always be relevant to its morality. If I were absolutely certain that a lie would do good, I should certainly hesitate before speaking the truth. And the certainty might be of such a kind as to make me think it a duty to lie. Green has considered the subject of ethics from the metaphysical or Adhyatma point of view. Definitely says, with references to such occasions, that in these cases the principle of ethics do not satisfy the doubts of men, and ultimately comes to the conclusion that a true moral philosophy does not recognize any value in conformity to the universal rule simply as such, but only in that which ordinarily issues any such conformity, namely the readiness to sacrifice every lower inclination in the desire to do right for the sake of doing it. The same is the opinion of other Western writers on ethics, such as Bain, Webel, and others.